think it's time to, for a whole bunch of you to say a whole lot of bad things about me. Because I'm flying too high right now. I've been sort of thinking about this moment for a long time, for over a year. And it's been just a really fine pleasure to come back and see my former students and have them arrange this event. And I brought a whole bunch of letters that I received from Texas. So Nancy and Joan and Bill and Kate, this is just really wonderful. I brought some letters written mainly by Nancy and Tony after I moved to Philadelphia. And in some of those letters I expressed my loneliness being in Philadelphia, because I had had such a wonderful experience at Texas and daily interactions, and being in a big museum with no students around was pretty traumatic for a while. And just listening to your talks today was just really terrific. And I look back on some of those letters and I see the germs of all this. I see phrases and parental investment, reproductive effort, and that was going on back then. And it's still happening. It's really terrific. Thank you for arranging this. All of this ultimately can be traced back to my wonderful relationship with Dick Alexander. Our family and his family have been very close, and it's been a terrific journey. And I'm going to end my talk with the same fire story. But it ain't going to be similar. Fortunately, there's always two sides to a story. I'm going to give you a rather improbable tale. I am 108 years old today. For 38 years, I was an egg. And I lived inside this woman, Lillian Young. She was a farmer's daughter who came from Iowa. These are her parents. She was born in Iowa, which is where I was initially formed as an egg. They moved then to North Dakota. Charlie Young had 4 brothers, and he had married Hattie Dignan. He was German, she was Irish, and they had a farm outside of Cooperstown, North Dakota. My mother went to St. Olaf College, and then she went to nurses training in Chicago. And this is a picture that was taken at some point, which causes me and my siblings a great deal of trepidation. We look at this picture and we hold our mouths and we say, oh my God, this is the guy she almost married. And always one of them says, that's the guy Mama almost married. And we think, boy, that was a close call. I mean, this is Chicago in the 20s. I mean, Al Capone was roaming the streets. And you can't tell me this guy doesn't look like he belongs to Al Capone's group. Anyway, she didn't marry him. She went to Africa. She was supposed to go to China, which is another close call. She might have married somebody in China. But anyway, she instead went to Africa, was a nurse, started a small clinic. Here she is attending some Africans. And the guy she met was this guy. It's my father, who was a third-generation white African. His great-grandfather. Here he is getting ready to go camping. He's holding a rifle and he's got lamps and everything ready to go. I used to use that gun many years later. His grandparents came from Germany and to join a German colony in South Africa. That's my great-great-grandfather and his wife. The wife was from the Thurmann family, and they're from North Germany, and he was also from North Germany, from a sort of a sheep growing area. She died quite shortly after my great-grandfather was born, and her other children went to America, and they established. They lived over in Minnesota somewhere, in Kandiyohi County, and then the mother of this woman, came to America then. So these are my. So here's my grandfather. This guy here. When he was a boy, and this was his father when he was an old man. He was a tailor and also a chaplain on a sailing ship that used to go back and forth between Germany and Africa, carrying colonists. And they established, and this is my grandfather again. I keep pointing to my thing here, but the short guy is my grandfather, and they're getting ready to go hunting and fishing and so on. My grandfather was sent to America and went to a school, Luther College, and that was because of some connection between the German missionaries and the Norwegian missionaries in South Africa. My great-grandfather had some falling out with the Germans, and he joined the Norwegians, and so there was this close connection between the Norwegians and my great-grandfather. And the Norwegians, or at least part of the Norwegian family, had established a college in Iowa, northeast Iowa, Luther College. And so my grandfather went to Luther College, and in the 1880s. This is actually a picture of him after he left college, and he was at the Lutheran Seminary in St. Louis. He went back to Africa, and on the way back he ordered a prairie schooner which was sent to Africa through Montreal. This is not the prairie schooner. I'm sure that wore out, but the mode of transportation back then was just by ox wagon, and he established a mission station up in northern Zululand. And you can see the name of his on there. And this is the mission station up on a hill, quite remote. And I think he liked these sort of situations because he could go hunting, and there weren't a whole lot of people around to minister to. But the lower building there is the church, which is still there. The building's now gone, but it was one of my favorite places to go when I was a kid. Now, on the other side of the family, my grandfather met a Norwegian woman, and they were the Astrups, and they initially came from Denmark. And this is the farm in Denmark. It was called Astrup Gard, and this building is still there, and Laurel and I went there, and some of our relatives are still living in that building. And we went in, and they gave us some tea, and they showed us the Astrup book. We have a bound leather book on the history of our family, which goes back to 1470. And this family had 2 copies of it, which is kind of neat. The family then left Denmark and moved to Norway, and so they went to Orskog in Norway. So we always thought of ourselves as Norwegians, but really we go back to Denmark. And the very interesting thing is that this Astrupgard, that other farm that I just showed you, is very close to northern Germany. The border between Denmark and Germany switched back and forth. And Laurel's ancestors came from the same region. So our ancestry traces back to a very small geographic region. This is the family crest, the Astrup family crest. I need to make a t-shirt of that. This is my great-grandfather and his wife. He was a cleric in Norway, and she was trained as an artist and had traveled and went to Italy and trained for a while in Paris. And she married this young up-and-coming church person. And then he decided that he was going to become a missionary and go to Africa. And boy, that was pretty difficult on her, I think. Now, this is a picture of my parents and the first 3 children. Now, I'm in that picture, but I think I've just blastulated. This is taken in 1938 on a German ship on its way back to Africa. I think I was probably conceived in Minneapolis, and so I'm a real Yankee. I mean, I got an American mother, and you know it all happened in Minnesota and whatever. So they're on a German ship, and they go back and this ship stopped in Hamburg in 1938, and that was a really bad period for the world. My parents describe German soldiers marching up and down, goose-stepping up and down Hamburg. This is a little later, and I'm the little guy sitting in the front with the dirty knees. And by this time, there's another brother who's come along. And this is the house that I lived in, and my bedroom is over here. And you can Google Earth that house, and I can get the coordinates for my bedroom on that house. You can actually see the whole thing. You can go right down. It's absolutely incredible. So I'm going to make another T-shirt that has my coordinates on it. And looking out from my bedroom, I slept on we had 2 bunks. So my brother and I had exactly the same coordinates, except different altitudes, 5 feet. And I was in the high bed. When I looked out of my bedroom, this is the scene I saw. This is where I grew up. And you can see some nice grassland and Afro-montane forest there. And way off in the distance, you see that mountain. Well, we'd go walking over there, and these mountains, these forests were hunting grounds for us. So we'll go over to that gap there. Now we look back, and you can see the house, and you can see all these lovely cliffs. So this is the house. And my Zulu friends all lived quite nearby, over in here. And this is looking down at the river, the Tugela River. The Tugela River comes out of the Drakensberg Mountains and comes, its origin is the 2nd highest waterfall in the world. It's almost 800 feet. And this is my sister and I sitting on the porch looking out over this valley with clouds in the distance. This is my siblings and some friends. I'm with the dog there, with the blonde guy with the dog. And this is how I got imprinted on late 1940s GM cars. Our neighbor bought a Chevy, and we loved that damn thing. And this was taken shortly after we acquired a windmill because we had water problems all the time. And I'm with my siblings and some cousins. Then I went to school. And my first friend was Donald Nuss. He lived about 4 miles away from me. And I discovered many, many years later that he became a famous physician. He lives in Virginia. And he pioneered in a certain type of surgery that involves a birth defect in children where the chest is incaved. And he developed a way of correcting this with minimal invasive surgery. So I need to look him up again. But he was a wonderfully imaginative little guy, and we used to sit under oak tree at school, and he'd tell stories. He was just full of imagination, and he'd make up stories, and he and my friends would sit around him listening to him. This is my school, and I was in one of these classrooms, and that's where I learned for the first time not to swear. I'll show you the picture of the person who made me not, who taught me not to swear. This is the original house built by my great-great-great-grandfather. It's sort of a typical German house. It's still there. It's still part of a school, German school. This is my teacher, or two of my teachers, my principal, Willi Schulze, and Miss Paper. Miss Paper was my first grade teacher. She was really a very nice lady, but one day I called somebody a bloody fool. And she took me outside, and there was a faucet out there, and she brought out this big bar of soap, and she stuck that bar of soap right in my mouth and made me, you know, so that was kind of traumatic. Every vacation time, or every July, we would go up to my grandfather's house. I showed you a picture of the place earlier on, and it's just over the top of this, just over the top of that flat top tree there. And that was a wonderful occasion. We used to ride donkeys. And this is the house again, looking down from the top of the hill. And my uncles and grandfather and so on would get together and go hunting in the winter months. And then we went to America. And this is me looking at the ship I was about to board, Pretoria Castle. My mother always called us Danny's ship. We got to America in the middle of winter and took the New York Central from Chicago from New York to Chicago in the middle of winter, and it was nice and snowy and wonderful. And we got to Chicago, and we got on the famous Hiawatha. I'd been seeing these trains in National Geographic magazines for years and years, and I thought they were absolutely wonderful. Now I was absolutely on one, hurtling through the snowy fields, and that's how I got imprinted on these wonderful American trains. So that's one of my hobbies now, is I paint these old things, and this is one of the great ones. And then I went to Decorah School for the first time, and my first classroom was under one of those towers. And I went into my first class, which was a civics class taught by a guy named Mr. Fox. And everything was just totally foreign to me, and I didn't know how American classrooms operated. And just to give you an example of my confusion, Mr. Fox said, "Okay, everybody take out a piece of paper and number it 1 to 20. A lot of shuffling. And I'm looking around and wondering what the hell's going on. And then he says, "Okay, true or false," and then he'd read something. I'd see people making things, and I didn't know anything about true or false. What the hell's true or false? And at the end of the exam, my paper was totally empty. Oops. My paper was empty. And he said, "Okay, everybody change papers," and then we corrected them right there. And Robert Ulrich was a fat boy right next to me. And he looked at me and said, "What?" And they found out that I was from Africa. And then it was like, "Whoa, this guy's from Africa." And people would come up to me and say, "Why aren't you black?" You know. Well, after a year and a half in Iowa, I didn't learn a whole lot that year. I did learn some very important things. I learned about all the American heroes. I read everything I could about Wild Bill Hickok and Davy Crockett and all those guys. I was just 11 years old, and so all that was very meaningful. I used to even write little poems about the men in blue fighting the Sioux and things like that. And the other thing, I started learning taxonomy then, because my brother and I became really good at being able to spot cars down the road at half a mile. we'd name the make and the model. So that was a big contest. Oops. So I went back to Africa for a number of wonderful years. And this is a picture of me holding, well, and my buddies. Now I have to point out that one of these guys, this guy here, I think, Bill, you might have met him briefly. His name was Piwa. He turned out to be an incredible businessman. Even during apartheid years in South Africa, became a millionaire, and his wife drove Mercedes, and he did too, and his brother, Sabelo, who's the farthest one over in the northwest there, was very proud of Piwa. So there's another. There were almost no cameras at the time. Very few cameras. My family never had cameras, so when we encounter these pictures, they're like treasures to me because there are almost none. So here we are with all kinds of weapons of mass destruction. Spears and clubs and slingshots. I mean, anything that could do damage. And here's another one. And I must say that some of these guys now have a cricket genre named after them. I decided these guys deserve something special. So I've just finished this book on Caribbean crickets, and I've used their names. So there's Peter Knia, who is a guy from Namibia, and Jabulani and Valapi and Dopozi, and wonderful. So this is a picture of my class, and I'm in the back there, quite close to my teacher. My teacher was called Whiskers, for obvious reasons. So during this period, my brother and I used to put together a picnic, and we would walk from our house right down to the Tugela River. It was 9 miles, and you can see an island way down there, and that's where we used to walk. And we'd come down to the river, and we'd strip our clothes off and just play in the river all day. And by the end of the day, my black friends were still black, and my brother and I had turned red. And that caused a lot of amusement from my black friends. I said, wow. At the end of the day, of course, we had to walk way up again. Now, my house is right there. Fortunately, there was an old African bus that used to come by, and it was driven by a huge, big Afrikaner, and he would give us a ride back, but he had to stop halfway up the road, and he'd go off and join the Africans and have some Zulu beer. He was a massive man, 6'6" or 6'7", and he was called Tiny. This is the cliff, one of the cliffs just below our house, and my brother and I found a way down this cliff, and we found our way down by following the goats. The goats used to come right to the top, and so we'd chase the goats, and they would disappear over the cliff, and we said, how do they do that? And so we finally found our way down here, and my mother, who absolutely hated cliffs, did not want to hear this story. So then I went back I finished high school and went back to college in Iowa. It was tradition to go to Luther College, and so here I am in 20 below weather, my first winter in Iowa, and this is my dormitory. And in the first summer, I joined a friend that I had known from childhood, and he had a Model A, and we drove up to northern Michigan. He told me that there was a wonderful job there at the National Music Camp, and I applied and got in, and we drove all the way to Michigan. And I worked in the dish room. I'm the guy with the crab apples. And working in the salad room. No, were you in the? No, you were on the line. On the serving line was a girl that took my fancy. And I had never dated before. I mean, Laurel's the first person I ever dated. And anyway, after a while, we got to know one another quite well, and we'd go on little outings with some of our friends. And this is a picture of Laurel at the University of Michigan. I decided I had to leave Luther College and go to where she was. And so after a year and a half, I applied to Michigan and got accepted. And after finishing my degree, Laurel and I were married. And then sometime after that, we had babies. Oh, I should tell you about finding out about babies. I was with Dick on that long trip, the one where he said, let's go to Australia. I was on that trip, and we were way down in Arizona, Gila Bend or something like that. And I called Laurel just about at dark, and Laurel said, she said, Daniel, you're a father. And I said, what? And she said, yep, you're a father. So I drove down that road towards Mexico thinking, wow, this is fabulous. So here's the other one. Laurel was holding one, I was holding the other. You couldn't tell them apart hardly. And these are our passport pictures. So we're on our way to Australia again. Oh, at some point I had to reveal to Dick that Laurel was pregnant, and you know we couldn't probably go to Australia, and we told him, and he just said, "That's okay, we'll all go. We'll be like a baboon troop or something." So here we are, stopped, and Laurel's herding her children on Fiji. And here's a picture of Dick holding one. This is the alpha male now holding one of the subadults. And there's the alpha female is there, and the subadult juvenile females. There was no beta male at that time. It was at most a gamma male. And here we are on this Land Rover in the land, or we stopped by the roadside to rest in one of these interminable stretches in Australia with open eucalyptus country. And so you can see, you know, everybody's there, and there's the trailer, and then Dick has told you about our long adventure. This is Dick, and he's carrying that incredible Nagra machine that he'd already busted, but it's still working. And I thought this was the moment after he'd driven over the Nagra, but it isn't. It's some other time when he was feeling frustrated or something. And here's another shot way out in the outback somewhere. And this was a road, geez, Dick, where was this now? It was,
the way to Cooktown.
no, this was up northern Australia. Remember we carved crickets on that baobab tree?
Yes. Kimberley.
In the Kimberleys, yeah. So Dick and I parked under this tree, and we carved pictures of crickets on this tree. And it'd be very nice to see if there's anything remaining of those. After Australia, I received word from the University of Texas that they were offering me a job, and so I took a job at the University of Texas. And one of my students, this is one of my students, Tony, and Tony, they don't wear shorts like this anymore. The shorts go way down to your ankles now. And so Tony and I did a lot of trips in western United States, and we had a wonderful time. Here's another shot of Tony going after something, and here he's just caught something. There again, Tony, those shorts, A little too short for these days. While I was at Texas, I started working on Hawaiian crickets. And here I'm tape recording some Laupala crickets. They sing in the daytime, and this is a thicket of hibiscus. And after some years, and this cricket work continued until after I left Texas and went to the academy. And when I was at the academy, I gave a talk at a speciation symposium, and a student from Washington University in St. Louis came up to me after the talk and said she wanted to talk to me about these Hawaiian crickets. She seemed like she was interested in. And I thought I'd given a really bad lecture that night, and so I wasn't feeling very chatty, and I think she detected that. But she was persistent, and she got in touch with me later on. And years later, she told me, "Boy, you were really mean that night." Anyway, this is Carrie Shaw, and it's one of the great pleasures of my life is having somebody as wonderful and bright as Carrie follow up on systematic work that I did there. If you went to her talk this morning, I think you'd have to agree that this is somebody who's just right at the forefront of understanding or working on speciation. This is just the best kind of speciation work that's being done, and it's been a real pleasure to have Carrie here. And of course, Carrie has students now, and Amanda's one of her students from Harvard. And so this tradition of Dick to me and to Bill and so on is continuing. It's wonderful. Anyway, here's a picture of Carrie sitting in front of a welwitschia tree in Namibia. My longest association has been with Bill Cade. Bill. Now this picture requires some careful explaining. Bill and I would go to. There's another closer picture. Bill and I would go to Africa quite frequently. I invited Bill to come with me once, and Bill fit into our African family just beautifully. And for years later, people always ask, "Is Bill coming?" We sure enjoyed Bill. Anyway, we were out on this. This is a real cricket field, like English cricket, the game. And this cricket field was infested by burrowing crickets, and of course they don't like them there. So we were collecting them, and we found out that these crickets had Y-shaped burrow entrances. So there were two holes to a main burrow. And one day we saw a sun spider, midday, just walking along, and when the sun spider touched one of these little mounds of grass covering the burrows, the sun spider went down one burrow, and a cricket came popping out the other burrow, the other branch. So Bill had this bright idea that he could extract crickets just like that. So we caught a sun spider, and Bill tethered him. He's got him on this fishing rod. So here's Bill fishing for crickets.
It worked.
Yeah. And it worked. And here's Bill in an incredible place in Namibia called Sossusvlei. It's just miles and miles and miles of these gigantic sand dunes. So it was one of our many trips. This is Bill and myself with a chief in Zambia, and this chief is I don't know what he is, great-great-great-grandson of the chief, Chitambo, who took care of, Elsa was there too. The chief who had taken care of David Livingstone when he died. David Livingstone, this is David Livingstone's memorial right there. Only David Livingstone's entrails were buried here. They took his entrails out, and they dried him turned him into, what, biltong or something. And then they transported him, I think, 1,600 miles to the Kenyan coast, and then they put him on a ship and took him back, and now he's buried in Westminster Cathedral, sans intestines. This was a nightmare trip, and Bill and I were endlessly frustrated at the incompetence of driving on this, and we were essentially stranded with this group of people for 3 weeks. We had no way to get out, and Bill just kept going into his tent, and he had one tape that he always listened to. It was the only one he had, and the only reading material he had was one old-time magazine. So, and to keep occupied for 3 weeks, this Time magazine wore out, and the tape wore out. And another colleague of mine that I collected with a lot in Africa was Nick Jago, and here he's having his cup of tea. And much later, I've been associated with a number of other people, and this is Lauren. Now, Lauren is pretending to be the queen of the Kalahari here or something, I don't know. But this is one of those success stories again, where you introduce a student to a situation and to a group of organisms, and they pick up on it, and they do absolutely wonderful work. And we saw what Lauren's doing this morning. And my latest trip was with Lacey Knowles. Lacey's not here. Lacey's a professor of biology at University of Michigan, works on grasshoppers. My first interaction with Lacey was a long time ago. I think in 1996, she wrote to me and said she wanted to work on Hawaiian crickets. And I said, well, you can work on them, but they're really difficult to work on. There's one group that's fairly easy to work on, but Carrie Shaw is already working on them. And I think you should work on Rocky Mountain grasshoppers, because that's what I was working on at the time. I said, there's all kinds of lovely speciation stories here. These things are living in alpine situations. Right here, with these mountains that you see here, there's packed with great stuff. So Lacey joined me in Montana, and this last year she kept bugging me about going to Africa, and so this year I said, well, why don't you come with me? And on this trip she got really intrigued with a very small group of grasshoppers. They're 5 millimeters long, adults, and here she's going after one. Lauren, this is where we collected one of the Lorimas. This is just south of Craddock. And here's Lacey next to a game guard. We went into an area where there were a lot of buffalo and so on, and so we needed somebody to take care of us. Now, here's the fire that Dick Alexander built. Dick's way on the other side of the fire. Actually, I got to tell you the real story about that fire. I didn't build Aboriginal fires, and they weren't 1.5 inches tall. They were just normal South African fires, or Canadians build fires the same way. Americans built different kinds of fires. They make big ones. Anyway, Dick was not satisfied with my fire, so he went to the truck and he was pulling out all kinds of boxes and lighting them and setting fire to them, and it wasn't happening fast enough, so he went back and got the flamethrower and got it going, and it wasn't acting properly yet. It wasn't loud enough, and so he went into our supply of grenades and threw those in. And that's my brother. This is actually a fire we found in Oklahoma, but it's fairly similar to the ones that Bill and Elsa and I built in Kruger National Park. We didn't like the way South Africans build fires. They make these little fires that last about 20 minutes, and they cook their little meat on it, and then they all go to bed. Bill And Elsa and I, when we go there, man, we go out there and we poach and we bring in lots of wood. And you've never seen Elsa poach before. If somebody's coming, you say, Elsa, there's somebody coming. She doesn't drop the wood and just go back to the car. She tucks it closer, goes even lower, and goes to the car. And then we have a wonderful time. We have some South African wine, and we sit there and we have a great time. So my brother here is, we're cooking our marshmallows, and that's about it. Thank you.
But anyway, I have her working on grasshopper stuff. She just loves grasshoppers. And I don't quite understand that, but then one day I walk into the lab and here's this print on the refrigerator. And I asked her what was going on. She said, well, I had some extra linoleum, undergraduates. But anyway, this is all of our gift to you. It's just a sort of little thing. And if you'll notice this, start looking at this carefully, there's new anatomy that she's sort of figured out for grasshoppers. So, but thank you. I don't need to say anything about what we think about Dan.
I have some presents too.
We're first. We're first. And this is from all four of us, Dan. I do want you to open it, please. So can I just put it here?
You don't want me to?
I do want you to open it.
Laurel doesn't like the way I write. I ruined the paper.
Is anything going to jump out here?
It's heavy, 2 hands.
That's stuff by the base.
Lovely Eskimo art.
Okay, so Alexander, up here. Come on, come on. You might be the alpha male, Dick, but here I am. I couldn't pass that one up, Dick, sorry. I have a special souvenir from the University of Lethbridge for both of you, and although that's probably the wrong season, I do want you to open it, please. Yeah.
That's one thing Dick and I always did. We'd get into races. We'd get into contests, and we'd throw rocks at one another. We reached a point in our trips where we wanted to kill one another. The best time was the day we were driving along across the desert. We'd been arguing about everything, but kindly. And we got louder and louder and louder. And before long, we were both yelling absolutely the top of our lungs at the same time. And we did that for several miles. And by that time, we were both laughing so hard we couldn't quit. This is great.
Well, it's not the right temperature, but we hope you enjoy that, and we hope you remember the U of L as a place that is very special.
I have something for you guys.
It's your turn.
One One of my my hobby these days is doing illustrations. I like to illustrate or paint digital, it's mostly digital painting, places that I love, places that I've been. So I have some pictures. I haven't written names or names on here, so I just have to peer at them first to see who gets what. Okay, this one's for Tony. I do a lot of train pictures these days, and this is a train picture, and it's a train that I used to take when I was a kid in South Africa. And so this is a picture of one of my favorite collecting spots down in Costa Rica. And this is for Nancy. This is a picture of a beautiful road in South Africa that crosses the Drakensberg Mountains. And Bill and I have been on this road a number of times. So Bill, this is a picture of the road crossing Collins Pass.
How special, Dan. Thank you.
I have one more picture here, and this is for
Debbie.
Debbie.
Unfortunately, Debbie left.
This is a picture. I take lots of pictures in museums of glassware and museum sort of things, and I did this of some glassware in the Corning Museum in New York. And so if you could give this to her.
Debbie will love that. And I'll make sure Debbie comes by in the morning.
Thank you, guys. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you've had a very informative, and I hope you had a very good day. It's been a long one, I know that, but you can see what a special guy Dan Otte is, and many of you know that firsthand, and those of you who have not met Dan before, he's made a real difference in evolutionary biology. He obviously has an adoring family, and the four of us, I think, we're very, very fortunate to have worked with you, Dan, while you were in Texas, and we're really glad we've been able to keep all of us our association with you over the years. Mozambique, right? Mozambique, next. I think we're going to delay breakfast a little bit tomorrow morning, so it'll be around 7:15. So 7:15, 8:30 is breakfast. Again, you're on your own with respect to where you'd like to go. I know a number of people have expressed an interest in Waterton, Scott, you have, and so if you'd like to organize to do that, or if you're a solo, that's great too. It's a wonderful place to visit. But I hope to see most of you in the morning for breakfast. And thank you again for being here this evening. And one more round for Dr. Otte.